risk of divorce and family dysfunction is greater in homes living with special needs. Our coping mechanisms often affect those that are closest to us. In our isolation or anger, we often overlook how our actions affect our loved ones. In this video, we identify the unintended outcomes and explore how our relationships have been affected.
After a special needs diagnosis, family dynamics change. Everyone is impacted in some way. We call this collateral damage. The demands on time, finances, and other relationships become overwhelming and stressful. We all know that relationships take time, effort, and energy, and those commodities become scarce when you're dealing with constant therapies, doctor's appointments, and everyday caretaking responsibilities. And for men, this can feel like a daily battle. In the Bible, when the Israelites were about to be delivered into the Promised Land, God still required them to go into battle to defeat the giants of Jericho. They were led by Joshua, who was a faithful, strong, and courageous leader who was also prepared to follow God's crazy plan. God had instructed Joshua to have a few priests walk around Jericho's city walls and blow horns for 6 days, then give a yell on the seventh day. That was the plan. Joshua had faith, though, and obeyed the Lord, and sure enough, the walls came down, and he and the Israelites were victorious in battle. The men you're about to hear from next have a lot in common with Joshua. They are strong and courageous, faithful men who are still in a battle for their families.
I think I created pain unintentionally for my oldest daughter. Her life changed. She was just a little child when this came about. And so, going from the only child in the family to you've got another child in the family, but this one is getting all the attention and is, really absorbing mom and dad's time on a regular basis.
I think that your children and your family, your spouse, tend to take the heaviest blows.
Well, when you're raising normal, typical children, I mean, there's a lot of focus on them. All of a sudden, you get a special needs child, and there's that same amount of focus, the same amount of time becomes toward one as opposed to others.
There was an impact to my other children as well. We can't do a lot of things typically, with Hayden. Like if it doesn't interest him, then he's going to make it difficult for everyone else to be there.
It's been very tough for them, especially my twins. They're a little older. I mean, in their teen years, they often very embarrassed by some of Jeffrey's noises or his not inappropriate behavior, but different behavior in a peer setting. It's been a challenge.
Have there been frustrating moments with them? Yes, there has been. My older son, when he was in grade school, we took Hayden to an event, and he screamed a lot because he didn't want to be there. So he was embarrassed. There have been times like that. Yeah, we missed out on a lot, especially early on because of all the expenses that we had. We missed a lot of vacations. We missed a lot of trips. We missed, on going to do fun things simply because we couldn't afford it, and simply because we just didn't know how he would react in those situations.
For sure, there have been many situations where we couldn't do something because she couldn't do it.
I do think that they have resentment. They don't verbalize that much, but I do feel for them.
I would venture to guess that my older daughter would probably say that she felt there were things she couldn't do. She just took it upon herself to filter things that she might have wanted to do before it even became something that we would be asked to do. I think she probably did feel resentment.
I don't feel like my kids ever had any resentment because, this is one of the things that we did right, which was, for the most part, we treated her the same as everybody else. I think it's the special treatment that gets people in trouble. And it's hard not to do that because there is special treatment that you got to go to this particular doctor's appointment or whatever. But for the most part, all the same rules applied. I think the biggest collateral damage is definitely on the marriage, right? That's the most immediate impact.
People will say that, and the research will say that marriages are extremely fragile if you have a child with a disability.
As parents, as spouses, your focus still becomes that child and doing what you can for him, in our case, for her and others. And that becomes your focus, and you really just lose sight of each other, of spending time. You should, but you just don't have time for that. And we're raising children. We're raising a special needs guy here. But at some point, you realize that's not healthy. We need to make time for ourselves.
But I think the biggest thing is I would focus not so much on the child or even my kids, and I'd focus on her, because that was the biggest stressor. And I'm sure other people have mentioned this before, the divorce rate, right? Well, you can see why.
It's been a roller coaster ride. My wife has been full caretaker of my son, and I've been the full provider for my son. She's almost a super mom, but she would never put those words to it. But she's taken on the challenge of homeschooling 4 children, and one of them being a special needs child. And boy, this has brought a whole dynamic into our marriage, and
Julie did a lot of that. She, would take her to speech and occupational therapy and physical therapy and all those kind of things. And I think when I'd get home and we'd have discussions about what do we need to do or how do we need to do it, a lot of times I would think this is what we needed to do, and my wife would think something else, and would lead to friction.
We're the two that support each other. I mean, we're the core of the family, and yeah, it was tough. It was tough being angry at her and being angry at myself, and her being angry at me, and lots of fights ensued. On how to handle it. What was the best way to do this? What was the best way to do this? And of course, everybody has their own opinion on everything. It was a tremendous strain on our marriage. I mean, it was a tremendous strain.
I think Gina and I probably grew distant, hurt just by the situation, hurt by one another.
So that was the biggest thing, is she felt like she didn't have enough support, which was true. I think she was completely accurate on that. The flip side is she sort of didn't let me in. And so again, it was just this divide, and where the one thing you really need to do is come together.
A couple of times the word divorce came up in conversation, albeit not seriously. When we kind of got serious about that, she's like, we shut that down. It's not even consideration.
If anybody watches this and they're like, oh, my marriage is falling apart. Well, again, welcome to the club, right? It doesn't have to end that way, because everybody's been through it.
You can't go through a battle like this. You can't go through something like this without, being in love and being with your soulmate. I mean, it just doesn't work.
We have fought our way through the hurt.
As you've heard from these men, it's not easy to fight this battle. Every marriage has conflict, but throw in a child with a disability, and the potential for conflict rises exponentially. There will be conflict, disagreements, and times where you can't see eye to eye, and the stakes are extremely high. But these men admit that they had to work hard and failed at times, and yet still kept battling through the adversity. And they'll tell you that it's worth it. It's worth the fight. They do not make divorce an option. Even through the toughest times of extreme pain and wounding, they tried to stay engaged with their spouses and made time for each other.
Rebecca has definitely been impacted in her life by this. It has given her an ability to appreciate people at a different level. I think siblings that have special needs siblings have a completely different aspect or outlook on life. I would assume, tend to be a lot more mature at a much faster rate because they just have to be.
Particularly with my 8-year-old boy, he's amazing like that. He's got a tremendous amount of empathy because I think he's just seen it through the care that we've have to provide. And
I've observed how they have become just incredible young men through as siblings to Jeffrey. I remember them going to different special needs camps and just thoroughly enjoying it. And I was so proud of them, so proud of them.
You know, my older son, you know, he's a great kid. He'll come over and he can be a therapist tomorrow if he wanted to be. He knows how everything works.
I believe that's because she had to deal with something at such a young age and continue to deal with it over time and understand that God has put people in our lives for a reason.
Children who grow up with special needs siblings are often asked to sacrifice, work harder, and are regularly exposed to shame and embarrassment at a really young age. These kids are asked to be mommy and daddy's helpers and take on more responsibilities. We've seen at Barren Heights that it's common for many of these kids to be more mature. They tend to have greater empathy and stronger character because of their position. In today's culture, most people don't learn sacrifice, serving, patience, and perseverance at an early age. The new buzzword for this is emotional intelligence. And the blessings from learning sacrifice for others is a life filled with purpose, perspective, and love.
I think one of the gifts that I've gotten from this disability is that I don't judge anybody. I don't judge anybody's child for any reason because they're all, to me, God's children. So that gift, I think, has spread through my family.
We have a lot of relationships that have formed because of the special needs. In particular, my wife, she's a giver, and she's helped so many people who have been in the same situation.
We also were introduced to Barren Heights. So my wife has a group of ladies that she can talk to and chat with, and I've got a group of guys that understand what it means to be a parent of not only a kid or a child with special needs, but a teenager with special needs. I wouldn't have had that resource or that connection had Macy not come along.
I mean, we were invited to be part of the Barren Heights retreat, and that was an awesome experience. And as we stay involved in Barren Heights, date night and that type of thing, it's all very helpful. It's really not about being helpful, but yeah, we're continue to develop relationship with other people in a similar situation.
if you would ask a parent of a child with a disability, do you feel like you've had a gain in relationship with somebody? And I would think most of them say, no, I think it's probably hindered relationships. But in my situation, I think it's definitely helped.
There's a lot of relationships to be formed, and you have the one thing in common where we're all sort of to varying degrees dealing with the same thing. But yeah, I've formed a lot of good relationships, especially through Barren Heights, where we've just gotten to know people who either have special needs kids or they care about special needs kids. And those kinds of relationships are just, they're just priceless. So
You have heard from these faithful men that all family relationships are impacted and suffer collateral damage when a child with special needs enters the household. That comes with great challenges and some blessings. These men have found hope in several places. They put their trust in the Lord for His provision. They make time for their wives and all of their children and for special occasions. And thirdly, they don't live in isolation. They are connected with other men in authentic community with the help of Barren Heights. Men are available to meet with you by contacting us through our dedicated email at battlebuddies at barrenheights.org. In our next video, we'll hear more from our battle buddies about how to handle advancing forward in your battle plan.